Hey, everybody, and welcome to The Savvy Entrepreneur, the podcast that is for entrepreneurs and by entrepreneurs. I'm excited to be your host. My name is Michelle Burkhart, and I am with thesavvymind.com, and I am the developer of the Breakthrough to Success, the Income Accelerator program. I'm here today with Michelle Harmon from Frugality.com, and I'm excited to talk with her because I think it's kind of a revolutionary concept that she started. So I'm excited to welcome to the show, Michelle.
Hi, Michelle. Good afternoon.
You know, and we were talking off camera a little bit. I said, you're the first person I've ever interviewed with the same name. So this is going to be kind of challenging. We'll see how this all works out. That's what we'll do.
If you forget my name, that'll be interesting.
That'll be a really issue. That will be a big issue.
Yeah.
So talk to me about, let's talk first. Let's just lay the groundwork. Tell everybody what it is that what do you do? What's the company?
Frugality is a early stage company. We've been around since 2012, and it was really started by Gail Peace, who is the founder, and she is a hospital person for the last 35 years. We both graduated from the University of Missouri, Columbia, with our MHAs in business, and this is our third company together. And Gail was sitting in Chicago trying to figure out how to pay some physicians she'd partnered with, and really started rooting around, if you will, about how many steps it takes to pay a doc. And it was somewhere around 34 steps.
Oh my God.
It was just a pain in the hiney, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And, she and I both been involved in startups before and learned a lot of lessons. And she came to me and said, what do you think of this idea? And I said, I think it's tremendous. And she asked me to get on her board with her. And then 2 years later, was it 3 years? 3 years later, I joined her.
Great.
It worked out because we both have very vertical, deep knowledge base of physicians and hospitals and how the two work together, or more accurately, how they don't work together, and that this was a gap in business for both hospitals and physicians.
Tell everybody kind of like why this is important to hospitals, because I think the average person has no clue about the breadth of this issue.
Sure. So we'll do something easy. So everybody, unfortunately, has had to go into an ER, an emergency room. So whether you were in a car wreck, God forbid, or you had a child that broke his arm, you interface with an ER. What the public doesn't realize is there's an on-call physician. There are on-call nurses that man, if you will, that point of access, which is the ER. And the hospital has to pay them fees for being there 24/7, whether Michelle Burkhart shows up or not. That's called on call. So what the public doesn't know is that is a check that's handed. And actually there are federal regulations around what a hospital has to have to, for instance, have a level 1 trauma center. You have to have certain providers on call. And so that's a cost that the hospital bears, and they have to pay that physician. And so what we have found at Frugality is that how that ER call gets paid is not necessarily tracked or is easily transparent or is easy for the physician to enter her call time and then, get a check. So all of it, nothing irritates anyone more than waiting around on a paycheck.
No,
and you want to irritate somebody, keep them away from their money they earned. And physicians have been playing this dance with hospitals, since forever. Sure.
So give me an idea of in a hospital, you mentioned when we were talking off camera, there's a lot of zeros connected to this financial impact for the hospital. So why don't you share with just an example of what that would be?
Yeah. So Michelle, that's a really good point. We see, because of the business we do, and we serve over 275 hospitals a year, and we've been able to do what I call napkin math, if you will, to estimate what they're spending. And what we see with a 200 to 300 bed community hospital is they're spending $20 million a year in physician compensation. And it runs out the door, and it's kind of like death by 1,000 paper cuts, where the payments are siloed. They're in many different agreements. And believe it or not, 20 million can get out the door without a staff being able to really get their hands around it because of the way the infrastructure and the decision making is so parceled out in a hospital system.
So they're spending $20 million before they even realize they spent $20 million.
It just kind of adds up. The way I kind of describe this, Michelle, is if you look at all the fees that hit your credit card. So let's say I have an Apple account and I have a teenager, and I see these fees coming through, and they're like $5 here and 99 cents here or whatever. But if you look at that, and it's like, you look at that for 12 months though. Okay, so you look at any fees that anyone is assessing on you, and you look at that for a rolling 12 months, you're like,
right.
You know, that's kind of what's going on with hospitals. These are really sharp people. It's not that they're obtuse or anything like that. It's just because you cannot see into it. That's the best way to say it. You cannot see into it. There's not a payroll for these kinds of things.
Gotcha. I gotcha. That's it's so interesting. So if you're just joining us, you are listening to The Savvy Entrepreneur, and I'm your host, Michelle Burkhart with thesavvymind.com. And we're talking with Michelle Harmon from Frugality.com, which is a mobile app that helps pay physicians on time and within federal regulations. And what I am so interested in, so really enthralled with the whole idea is that it's a tech startup and you didn't take any funding. So why don't you can you talk, I mean, is it too private to talk about the reasoning behind all that?
No, it's not all. We didn't want to be told what to do.
Well, that's kind of an interest. Yeah, well, you got a point there, you know, because when you take that, you definitely do. So talk to me a little bit about just entrepreneurship for you. How long have you been an entrepreneur?
So when I joined Ludi with Gail in 2015, I think we had about 7 people at Ludi. So dived in 2015, and then probably 2 years later, I started my coaching business. So what you learn is that you don't pay yourself. You need to be very frugal. What I see a lot of folks make a mistake about is if they have an influx of money, they pay themselves out. Gail is very sharp about watching money. And then I would just also say, between being frugal, we've been and we've made mistakes, don't get me wrong, but we've really focused on who we hire. The culture is our secret sauce. We're all virtual. We were virtual before COVID. I've been working in virtual environments for 20 years. I think the rest of the world's a little bit behind. You can do everything from home.
Right.
And you could still get sick at home too, but that's a different podcast. Anyway, we're virtual. And so what we did was we got a group of people that we really enjoyed and said, basically, is there anyone else like you? That's how we've recruited. And it's really served us well.
So what's the size of your staff now?
22.
Wow. You guys have really had a lot of growth.
Yeah, we have. Yeah.
That's exciting. That's really, really exciting. So if you're just joining us now, you're listening to The Savvy Entrepreneur, and I'm your host, Michelle Burkhart with thesavvymind.com. And we're talking with Michelle Harmon from Frugality.com, which is a mobile app that pays physicians on time and within federal regulations. And where we were just talking about hiring people and hiring the right people, which I think for entrepreneurs, that is that's challenging. That is really, I mean, I think that's probably one of the most challenging things that you have.
I would agree. I mean, we're not normal. We always lead with that. I mean, we're kind of proud of being the land of misfit toys. And that doesn't mean that being in early stage or startup and then working from home is for everybody. You've seen that during the pandemic, where people were not allowed to travel, not allowed to go in, and didn't do so well in that environment. I'm looking for someone that's a self-starter, that's really okay with chaos, that's really okay with, I don't know what we're doing. That's something that charges me up. If I had to go to work every day and I knew what I was doing every day, that would cause some boredom. So you're looking for, initiative. You're working for someone that can self-manage. You're working for someone that's interested in ideas. And there's all sorts of things, because if you, in a company as small as we are, one bad hire can be incredibly disruptive because we move really fast. We're all extremely close. I know that sounds cheesy, but work is personal. It's where you spend as much time. And if I don't want to have a beer with you, I probably shouldn't be working with you. So that's one of the things that we've tried to, instill here is really our culture is the secret sauce. We're really proud of it. And we work very hard to take care of our people. We actually did bonuses midsummer in the middle of the pandemic. And just to let everybody know, we're here, we're not going anywhere, all is well. And we do all sorts of things. My CEO has yoga on Fridays with everybody via Zoom. She's paying for that service. She pays for a meditation app. So while we ask a lot, our leader, Gail Peace, who's the CEO, we're very mindful about what our people need and how do we keep them, going and let them know how much we care about them. But I can't say enough about culture.
Yeah. Well, your people are your best asset.
They really are.
They really
They
are.
really are.
That's not just rhetoric. I mean, they really are. So what do you think the hardest thing has been for you being in this kind of a startup environment? What's the hardest thing?
I would say the hardest thing is isolating and identifying your blind spots. And so I will tell you one of the blind spots I had is as a single mom, sort of the way I'm oriented is if you see a mess, you go clean it up because there isn't anyone else to clean it up and you walk right into that mess. What I learned at Ludi was that we created a solution that's going to highlight a mess and you've got clients that don't want to know. And so that bias of mine really got in the way of some sales cycles and understanding, talking about what we do. I still don't think we're there, Michelle, quite frankly. This is a very esoteric, advanced product, but Gail and I are very similar into if you see a gap, let's get in there. And we sell into an audience. It's like, I don't know. And so there's plenty of folks in the world that do want to clean up mess and do want to know what they don't know. But then what I failed to factor in was there's a healthy bunch of Americans who don't want to know. Don't want to fix it.
You know what? And I'm just kind of, don't you think part of that is the doctors too, or they are on such a pedestal that they don't want to do anything that's going to rock that pedestal at all? Not that what you do would, but.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I would say I had that bias going in. I don't have any trouble with my doctors moving from a laborious paper, not nearly what you would think it is. It's more the hospitals shining a light on some of the issues that they have. Who I see the resistance from are not from physicians. It's from it's from hospital administrative leaders who are like, that's a pile of crap over there steaming. I'm not going near it. And that's really a bias that got me. So what I would tell other entrepreneurs is you want to spend some time with some folks that you really admire and critically think and have them just shoot at you. I did that. I went in front of someone that I admired very much and said, ask me anything you want. It was kind of like being in my finals for graduate school, right? Where they're just shooting at you. I would highly recommend you do that because it took me, I think one of the mistakes I made at Ludi was took me too long to not see my bias and then address it. Does that make sense, Michelle?
Yep. Because it's funny. Because I have to tell you, my business has evolved over the last 4 years. And I think part of the reason it's taken me so long to get to where I am now, because now I focus on helping my clients add value so that they can charge more, shift their positioning, charge more and attract more premium clients. And so, but I have to agree with you. I really think my bias, I have to agree with you that I think my bias was what made it take so long for me to get here too. I hadn't thought about it like that, to be frank, but because you don't know what you don't know.
Correct. And what I've learned is that what you think you know is never the stuff that gets you. It's the stuff that you don't even consider, or you're like, that's not an issue, that comes up and really gets you. So walking your idea out to somebody that may not even know, sort of the background, and just ask you a series of questions and kind of put yourself in front of a firing squad. And I do that about once a quarter. because it's this unearthing of bias. It's not just, oh, one thing, Michelle, it's a
Sure.
7-layer cake.
Right. And then when you get one, it's kind of like a, what do they call that? A whack-a-mole. You know,
Yes.
it's kind of like whack-a-mole, you know, it's like when you get one, then something else pops up. So, you know, I can definitely understand that. So, and if you're just joining us, you are listening to The Savvy Entrepreneur, which is the podcast that's for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. And I'm your host, Michelle Burkhart with thesavvymind.com. And I'm here with Michelle Harmon with Frugality.com, which is a mobile app that helps pay physicians on time and within the federal regulations, which as we're learning is kind of a big deal. It's kind of a big deal. So I'm excited to talk to you. You know, and you had sent me some questions about, you know, which it's really interesting to get your perspective on this, because, you know, you're in kind of a quantitative environment. And interestingly enough, a lot of the people that I've talked to, you're in a qualitative environment where I've talked to mostly with quantitative people, or vice versa. I can't even, now I'm confused. But, you know, you're much more dollars and cents oriented with your business plan and that kind of thing. And, you know, how I guess it's like, how did you, as a single mom, especially, if it's okay that we address this, you know, if you weren't paying yourself, that's kind of scary.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's not that I was paying myself, but I sure could have made a lot more money somewhere else. And I sure could have had a lot fatter benefits. So there was money coming in, but there were times when everything was a little ugly. We didn't know we were going to make payroll. That's not a fun position to be in. So one of the jokes that, you know, we have a back end feature of HR and finance. And one of the jokes I used to say to Gail, our CEO of Frugality, is she sure knows how to roll a penny. It's very important to understand what you're taking on. I think the biggest issue for Frugality, as is every company, is what healthcare costs and how the premiums go up. And in a small company, like I was in the hospital for 5 or 6 days last year, and what that does to premiums. So just the sensitivity of what somebody like a Walmart or an Amazon or, you know, a big chain can negotiate, very sensitive to what, you know, healthcare is the biggest offering that can really hurt a startup. And then also be sensitive to those cycles of collections, you know, those kinds of things. But yeah, well, I was always paid. I just made a trade-off here. I don't like to be told what to do, Michelle.
I can see that. Somehow I haven't known but a few minutes, but somehow I can see that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, there's trade-offs here. I think that's what's and I also think that's what's going to open up entrepreneurship even during the pandemic. I think you're going to start to see people start to double down, triple down on, you know what, I'm going to monetize my passion here and figure out to be in control of my own destiny. But there's just a lot that comes with that. It's not just, you know, getting a website and flipping it on and making millions. It's the little stuff.
And I think for new entrepreneurs, I think they probably have you know, it's interesting that when you talk to someone who's not an entrepreneur and you tell them that you are an entrepreneur, they just automatically think you're rich. You know, I mean, they just automatically think that you're rich and you have all this money. They don't realize that when you become an entrepreneur, you work more and make sometimes less because you're building a business, you know. And I think that's what's so interesting about that whole process. They don't always realize that, you know, Monsanto didn't become, well, it's not, Bayer didn't become Bayer overnight, you know. Amazon didn't become Amazon overnight. You know, it took steps and years and pain and growing pains and all that stuff. And
very
people
much
don't realize that. So, you know, so if you were going to talk to somebody now, if you were going to talk to an entrepreneur, can you give me 3 things that you would tell them to, like, because I think we've already had some really great nuggets of information, but I mean, like, kind of like, what's your thing? Like, what are your things that you would really say? You want to check out this, or you want to be aware of this, or be mindful of this. What are the things that you think are really important?
Yeah. So the first one is to constantly be cross-checking your bias. That never goes away. Okay. It's like working out, right? If I worked out for 2 days last week and I don't work out for all month, it doesn't count. But I can't stress the checking the bias, because if you're an entrepreneur, you can get in this mindset. And we work from home and we work really hard. And if I build it, they will come. It's not necessarily true. So the constant checking of your mind, of your bias, which is, there is a market for this. I am selling this correctly. I do understand it. That's number one. Number two is obvious, which is frugality. It's not a bad word. Be very, very aware, as if you go for funding, what you have to give up for that. Gail had plenty of opportunities to get funding, and she got a small amount of funding, but we've paid all that back, and there's always a trade-off. There is no money tree. If you're getting, so, the second part of that is, if you're going to go get funding, make sure you know what strings come attached, because money is not free. And a lot of people make that mistake. And then the third thing that I would tell you in entrepreneurship is the people. I mean, you can have the biggest, slickest, whiz banger, widget, gizmo on the planet. Okay. Solve, I'll be facetious here, cancer. If you don't have the right team, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and that's the part that's really hard. I mean, how do you know who the right team is? How do you hire the right people? I mean, you think you're hiring the right people. I mean, nobody makes bad hires on purpose.
No. And this is what if you're going to be an entrepreneur, this is what you just said, Michelle, really eloquently, is you work more. I mean, you are a full-time HR person. You are looking all the time. Mm-hmm. So you're working all the time, but you may run into your friend's kid who just graduated from the University of Wisconsin in a marketing degree. And, you're having a conversation. You're like, well, what's said kid doing? I mean, it's a constant, constant looking, and nothing can upend an entrepreneur deal as a battle of wills, people that don't understand. You're paying someone that's not working. There's all sorts of things that can happen. We've seen that. And so that's why it's really important to spend a lot of time on who you're hiring and when you're hiring. And it's constant. It's exhausting. You're always looking for talent.
Well, but though, if you want to keep, because your business, I think that's one thing that people don't realize, is that your business is fluid.
Mm-hmm.
You, even if you sit down and you do a business plan, even if you sit down and you do a marketing plan, those things are fluid. You cannot say it's not going to change from January to March to June. It could very well change. So, you have to be open to being that fluidness has to be, you have to be flexible. And it's interesting. I was talking with another entrepreneur, and one of the things that we talked about was failure. And I said to her, it's like, you need to be prepared. When you're an entrepreneur, you need to be prepared, and you want to fail hard, and you want to fail fast before you fall in love with something.
That's
like
true.
You were talking about your biases. You don't want to fall in love with it with an idea. Like, if you fall in love with the marketing idea, and I see this a lot, because I work with positioning and that kind of thing with my clients. Yeah. And they fall in love with this position. Like, well, no, I don't want to say that. I want to say this. And it's like, but it's not working for you. You can fall in love with it. Talk about your business like that with your family, but that's not that's not working for you out in the market. And it's like, so you want to fall hard and fail hard and fast before you fall in love with stuff.
Right. You want to get to the fail quicker. So the other thing I would say is that this entrepreneur space is not for people that have fear issues. Okay. So if fear is something that is not your jam, this is not your space, because you wake up.
That's not a bad thing. Let's clarify that. That is not a bad thing.
No, it isn't.
But for everybody.
No, but it's if fear is something that you wrestle with, I would look long and hard before you become an entrepreneur, because it's a lot like jumping out of an airplane.
Yeah.
And it's the most fun I've ever had, and the most brought me my passion, and I get to work with the best people on the planet. But very seriously, is fear or risk is something that you wrestle with, this is not the space for you, and that's okay.
Right.
That's okay. But it's
good to know. And I think it's really good to know. I think self-awareness is really good to know before you take that entrepreneurial step.
It's absolutely key. You have to know yourself. You have to know what you're like under pressure. And I'm talking intense pressure. Like, you're not going to make payroll and 3 people may not get a paycheck this week. That's pressure. And it may be bigger than 3 people. Or, the one client that you had decides not to sign, whatever it is. It's in an entrepreneurship, whatever the size of the wave, it can be big. And so you just have to sort of be mental resilience, I think, is mandatory. I don't think you can have a little of it.
Yeah.
I think you have to have the whole shtick.
I agree with you there. So let me ask you this, is there, how do, if somebody wants to get a hold of you, where would they go to get a hold of you or to learn more about what you guys do?
That is so sweet. Thank you. I appreciate that. So our website is www.ludy, which is LUDIINC.com. So it's ludyinc.com. And you can find me there. You can find our whole team there. And we actually have Lucas the bot who visits you, and you can write down anything that you're questioning, and someone from my team will follow up with you, or I myself will.
Great. Great. Is there anything else that any parting words you want to, parting words of wisdom you'd like to share with us?
Well, after I've scared everybody to death, I would just say that this is where it's at. I believe this is the future of the United States economy. I think it provides intense flexibility for people that want to do a lot of things. Let's say be a single parent. If I had to be in a corporate office from 9 to 5, that would have really limited how I could have served my daughter. And I think you see families bifurcating and changing, and it's not a negative thing. And the workplace is going to change and bifurcate. COVID is going to help us along with that. But I would highly recommend you coming in to be an entrepreneur. It is really cool, fast, interesting way to make a living.
Well, I have to, I've been an entrepreneur for a really long time. So, and I think I'm always happiest when I'm working for myself, because I'm like you. I like the idea of being able to pivot quickly. If I see something that's working, or if I see something that's not working, I'd love that opportunity to pivot quickly. And I make pretty quick decisions, so
do I.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I'm in or I'm out. I make pretty quick decisions. Sometimes it works out, sometimes like you, not everyone's a winner.
That's right.
So, you just have to make it work. Well, Michelle, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I really appreciate you taking the time. I think anybody listening to this, I think would agree that they learned a lot just about that. And I wish you all the success in the world. I love the concept. I can totally see the benefits to it. So I just hope you have all kinds of success, and you guys become a household word out there, and you just never know what'll happen.
Thanks, Michelle. I really appreciate your time today.
So have a great week. Most success. Love to your family, and we will talk again soon.
Thanks, Michelle.
Talk to you later. Bye, everybody. We'll see you soon. So cute.